a lot of the time, the best ideas come to you when you're not in the middle of doing something. So when I'm coding, I'm just trying to get stuff to work. And the pen plotter, the drawing machine, is so beguiling. When you watch it drawing, it takes time. You just stand, it's almost meditative. And when it's going through the process, you're then going, oh, wait, I've got an idea. Why don't I try this? And I try that. And all my ideas tend to come when I'm watching the machine draw. So it's fantastic for an artist to have a machine that is doing stuff for you and you can just watch it.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. Today I'm with Dan, who is a printmaker artist, an educator, a content creator, and he's done a lot of stuff. So I'm very, very happy to chat with him today. Hello Dan, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. This is going to be kind of fun.
Yeah, and let me tell you, you have the best background from all the guests in the host, all the episodes.
And that'll be great.
That's amazing. You're in your studio, right?
Yep, I'm in my studio. I'll give you a quick tour. So over here are the drawing robots that I have, like the pen plotters. And then this is where I keep all the stash of paper. So all my paper supplies go here, sorted to sizes. And then if we head over to here, this is where all the pens are. So these are all the pens that I use all the time. And then inks, and then more inks. So this is kind of stationery corner. And then this here is where I work most of the time. So I've got another plotter over here, drawing machine. We'll talk about this later. That my AI Kitty, who helps me, that's her pen plotter, so she does all of that. And then over this corner, this is the mail room corner where I've got all my mail shipping supplies, so tubes and things like that. This is where I charge all the hardware, all the batteries to keep them fully charged. And then right over here, this is the sort of the seating area. And you don't often get to see this, but this is the 70s pop chair that we really like based on the 70s pop design. And I'm standing in the middle of the room because it's the best place to talk to.
No, I'm very jealous, and I'm sure that many artists, and creators in general wish they had such an amazing studio, such a great space. Can you tell us a bit, when did you actually start making art, and when did you get your first studio? Is this your first studio, or you had one before? I think I saw you were moving. So maybe let's start there. Like, when did you start making art then?
Well, I started making art because I'm 52. So I did my college, my school year. That was all art and design. So I studied art and design there. And then I did a foundational art course. But it was during that I really discovered that I can't draw at all. And people say, oh, of course you can draw. It's just practice. But I really can't draw. But at the same time, they had a lab of new computers like PCs that are really, really slow, us. But it was amazing because I could take photographs and I could then bring those into the computer. And they had a very basic 3D package and painting package. So I started using that to manipulate things and then got a little bit frustrated with it because it didn't do what I wanted. So then I started working with code to try to get it to do the things that I wanted. And that's kind of where that started. And then my degree was an arts degree. So I carried that on through my arts degree.
So when did you start making art with code? That was when you were starting, actually, so a long time ago?
So when I was about 16. So that's 35 years ago, something like that. So with some people know this, Atari STs, the 512, so I started using that, and then PCs, a 286 PC with a maths coprocessor in it that made it run nice and fast at the time. So yeah, I was doing code then, and then my arts degree was sort of half arts, half computer degree. It's one of the earliest ones that did it, and my final year course of that was visualizing databases. So the database is based on academic papers. So I would take biology papers and you take the data from it and encode it, and that would turn into what we see now as a hash, like a hexadecimal hash string. And then that will control I had these sort of spheres that got rotated in shapes. So a quick example is biology papers would sort of turn into these blue blob type of shapes, and chemistry papers would turn into these yellow spiky type of shapes. And
Mm-hmm.
then by giving all of these papers a different like kind of icon or image, you could quickly visually sort them all out. But it allowed you to do a couple more things. So if you wanted a biochem paper, you look for something that was a mix between blue and smooth and yellow and spiky. So you go for a green semi-spiky shape. So even without knowing the data, you instinctively knew what to look for.
Oh.
But at the time, I was using a ray tracer called POV and slow computer, so it took a long time to actually generate these images. So I was very used to queuing them all up and then going to bed, and then waking up in the morning to look at like 100 outputs, and then going, oh,
Wow.
they're quite good. But
Hmm.
just before the end of my degree, I got really interested in the aesthetics instead of actually representing data. So I was like, well, instead of generating these, what happens if I take the best looking ones and I mix
Hmm.
those with other best looking ones? Can I slowly get even nicer aesthetic outputs? So that's what ended up happening is I'd run the computer overnight, get a whole bunch of results that I like the look of, and then try to improve on them. And that was really exciting. And that was very close to generative art. But the internet was just starting when I finished my degree, and they kind of went, "Do you want to be an artist for no money, or do you want to be a software developer on the
Yeah.
internet for big bags of cash?" I'm like, "I will take the cash, please." And then did that for like 25 years, pretty much. Um, but I always wanted to get back to doing art, which is where the first studio came from. Is I was working for museums. I was doing a lot of work in museums and cultural institutions. And I was going, I really want to get back to art, so I'm going to split my time into 20 hours a week working and 20 hours a week doing art with pen plotters. I always wanted to work with pen plotters. And I got my first studio, which was a old supermarket, and there was lots of spaces divided up, and it was freezing cold. And I
Hmm.
started all my time in there. So that's my first studio.
Nice. That's I mean, it's amazing to see you were doing, something very similar to what it's probably already generative art, right? Back 30
Yeah.
years ago. And I wonder during those years when, it wasn't as popular and the internet was starting or maybe even wasn't accessible back then.
Yeah.
How did you learn, Dan? Did you have friends? Did you communicate with people that were doing something similar, or it was yourself alone doing this
It,
kind of work?
to start off with, it was me alone, and then I got onto a very early version of the internet, like CompuServe and things like that. And when I went to university, um, there were more artists, but they weren't really using computers. There was an artist called William Latham who did things that evolved. It had shapes that kind of people called it generative art at that point,
Hmm.
because the idea was that you bred these different outputs together. So if you like this one and this one, you put them together and make a new one, but you would introduce mutations to it. And everybody thought that this was the future of computer programming at the time. You would have these two different computer programs that did roughly what you wanted. You would slowly breed them together until it got better and better. And that didn't happen at all. That just stopped and died off. But that was kind of the seed of where it was. So William Latham, I'll give you the link so you can drop a link down below.
Right. Yeah, and a reminder to all the listeners: every artist or collection we mention here, or even books, will be added to the show notes, so you can quickly
Yeah.
reference and find the information. That's amazing, Dan. That's exciting, and I guess we can move to a more present date when you discover blockchain art, because you have been also very much involved in the blockchain art movement, right? You have been teaching a lot of stuff for other artists, creating art with code, but also creating your own works. You have been showcasing multiple galleries. So how was that, after being an artist, um as a hobby for a while, but then doing it more like professionally, and then finding this new space? Was it like a radical change in your case, or
I,
not so much?
it from a conceptual coding point of view, it wasn't that much of a change, but I actually had to be dragged kicking and screaming back to it because I'd just spent all this time working on computers and on the internet and doing coding and going, I want to produce physical artwork, which is where the pen plotters came from. So I started doing the physical artwork. And one of the lovely things about drawing machines, pen plotting machines, which is very close to generative art, is you write your code that will generate an output and then it draws it. But unlike woodblock prints or screen printing or traditional print methods where they're supposed to be mass reproduced, like you have an edition of 200 and they're all identical, you can change the code and use different randomness in between pen plots to get a different result each time. And that's what really appealed to me. So I'm like, well, if I have this machine, why should I get it to print out, draw the same thing over and over again? It can draw a unique one every single time. And that was before I got into generative art. And then people started going, oh, here's the blockchain. Art blocks started up. And people going, oh, well, you should do that. And all the pen plotters I followed on Instagram started shifting towards digital. And I was like, I've just got out of digital. I spent all this time doing digital, and I stopped specifically to become an artist doing physical stuff. And then everyone's going, but everything's all over here. So I actually resisted it for about 6 months, I would say, and saw like my friends and peers moving onto it. And then it was my wife. She was like, why are you resisting this? Why don't you do this? It's right up your street. You enjoy doing this type of thing. You should stop being stubborn and do it. So I did, and that's where the first art blocks drop came from, like the 70s pop. There was that, and then which I quickly followed up with the other ones, and that was my break into NFTs.
Yeah, I can understand. Like you were trying to produce physical works for a while. You love working with machines, right? And different tools. You mentioned you wanted to paint at early age, and now like what became popular was the digital world, and very very popular, right? There was a lot of opportunities, and still there are in many galleries and marketplaces. Um, but what I find interesting in your journey, Dan, is, and I've been watching. By the way, I'm a big fan of your YouTube channel, your newsletter. I've been writing your newsletter. Reading your newsletter. Um, so you are also producing content, right? You are producing educational material. You're sharing your thoughts, your process with your studio, and kind of the life as an artist, right? Shipping your work to your collectors. So I wonder how has that influenced your process, creating material to educate others and sharing your life in the internet. Has that influenced the how you produce art?
I would say it slowed down my production of art quite a lot. It's kind of interesting because I'm probably one of the older people in this area. Because again, I'm 52 now, and I'm really happy with where I am. Like I've got a studio, I've got this thing. I don't feel as though I need to prove myself at all. I'm happy in that regards. And because I worked on quite big websites in the Web 2 era when that all blew up. So I'm quite well set just to do art because I enjoy it. So I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm not kind of going for validation. So one of the things that when I was growing up is I really appreciated when artists talked about their process, and there was a lot less of it then. And I learned a lot from that. And so I kind of feel I'm at the point now where I have lots of experience, and there's a difference between knowing how to code and having experience of having done it for a long, long time. And sort of you get to feel the shape of programs and code and things like that. So some of the stuff I'm trying to produce are things that I wish that I could have watched when I was growing up or when I was trying to be an artist. So it's trying to be helpful on that regard because I think I have some wisdom on that front. On the other side, I try to produce work that I know that other people could look at the source code of and understand and see it and try to figure out how to do it. And because I've been intending on doing kind of tutorials of drawing machines and the like, I don't want to do anything that's so amazingly complicated that people will look at it and go, I don't know how to do that. So on that regard for my work, until I've got all of that out of the way, I'm continuously producing work that I want to other artists to see and go, oh, I can work out how to do that, or I can watch a video to work out how to do that, because I want to lead by example and teach people that way. So I would say producing content, it means that I don't have as much time to devote to creating art, and also I'm trying to keep it at a level which other people can then decipher and work. And if I weren't producing all that content and I was just making my own art 24 hours a day, and not having to do all that type of stuff, that I would be probably further on or have a lot more outputs, but that's not what I care about. So I'm okay with that, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. No, totally. That makes sense. And I have the feeling that even if you cannot produce as many artworks, it also, it happens to me a bit with the writing, right? So that's why I created a podcast to, do something different, and it kind of leaves you space to refresh, kind of, and then
Yeah.
when you go back to making art, you're more fresh than if you were doing art full
Yeah.
time. Maybe I'm wrong, but I have the feeling that switching from different things is actually helpful to do other
Yeah.
things that has
I think
potential.
I think you're right. When I was doing work for museums, so what I was doing in museums is about 10, 12 years ago, all the museums were told you have to digitize everything. So they digitized everything and then put them into these big back-end systems. And now they don't really have a way of getting them back out of those back-end systems. So my role was to create APIs and GraphQL endpoints that interfaced in with those databases. So front-end web developers could go grab all the things out of the collections and display them, which meant that in the morning, I would be doing that work and I'll be looking at museum collections and art for like 3-4 hours every morning. And then in the afternoon, I would then be producing art. So that kind of fed in that way.
Mm.
Now that I don't do that anymore, now that I'm creating content and I split my day between admin and creating content and doing artwork, I have to force myself to go out to look at other art and push myself to go explore that a little bit more so it feeds back in. But I will say one thing for artists working with pen plotters and drawing machines, a lot of the time, the best ideas come to you when you're not in the middle of doing something. So when I'm coding, I'm just trying to get stuff to work. And the pen plotter, the drawing machine, is so beguiling. When you watch it drawing, it takes time. You just stand, it's almost meditative. And when it's going through the process, you're then going, oh, wait, I've got an idea. Why don't I try this? And I try that. And all my ideas tend to come when I'm watching the machine draw and when I'm not actually coding. So that's built into the world of a pen plotter drawing machine artist. You suddenly find yourself like deep in code and then pausing and having these breaks. So it's fantastic for an artist to have a machine that is doing stuff for you and you can just watch it.
Yeah, no, I never thought of that. That's interesting. And maybe about pen plotters, Dan, I think you are the best to maybe explain to those listening that are not familiar with, what's a pen plotter, but also how do you need to code or create your art in a way that works in a pen plotter, right? Because I've seen many artists that do prints. They are coding, creating art with code, but they do prints. They don't necessarily do pen plotting because the format, right? The way how you code the artwork needs to be in a specific format, right? So can you tell us a bit about pen plotting and the
Yeah.
requirements, let's say?
Yeah. So a pen plotter is a machine. I'll show you here. Hold on. So we've got this machine here. So it's got this carriage that runs down here that this slides across. And then it's got this arm that goes backwards and forwards. And you put pens into that so it draws. So it's also called like an XY plotter. And if you ever had a thing called an Etch-a-Sketch as a kid where you move the wheels and it sort of draws, it's pretty much like that. So you feed it. A pen plotter's really only got two commands, which is toggle pen up and down and then move to this XY coordinate. And you're sort of working with millimeters and centimeters because it's in print. So it's actually really straightforward. It's a very straightforward machine to get into. It can get more complicated. You go, I'm going to work with SVGs. But essentially, you're just going, if you wanted to draw a square, you would go move to 5 centimeters, 5 centimeters, then 10 centimeters, 5 centimeters, then 10 centimeters, and then back here, then here. And you've drawn a square, and we know that you'd stick that in a function. You go, now draw lots of squares repeatedly, and now make them different sizes, and now rotate them, and you start working with code like that, and then it draws it out. So that bit of it is straightforward. The main difference is you're only dealing with outlines. So a lot of generative art, you might have solid blocks of color or these big bands of color, but all you have is a pen with a single like thickness on the nib. So when you sort of draw a shape and then another shape, it's just going to draw the outlines. And that is the main cognitive difference for artists to get used to, going, oh, I only get to draw with lines. And even if you have a curve, it's actually lots of little points, describing that curve. But it's a really easy, if people are already doing art, generative art is one of the easier things to get into. Instead of setting up a screen printing place, getting yourself a pen plotter, and you can get cheap ones like an iDraw or even build your own, is a really good way of moving from generative art into the physical art space while still keeping all your engineering coding chops. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, we can see how it's closely related to math, right? You need to have some knowledge. Maybe that's the hardest part, I think, where you can, and maybe I'm wrong, but you can get stuck in the math when you're trying to do something and you cannot really get it done, not because of the code part or the machine, more on the logic, right? And
yeah,
that's what I think, because I used to be a coder, a programmer, not generative artist, and mostly like back end stuff, like databases and the back, not the front, so not very the aesthetics. So I spent a lot of time, designing these systems, like the logic behind them, and I always thought that that was the hard part of it. And then when I tried to create Gen Art, I also found like, okay, so you need to, for some things, you need some knowledge, or at least some patience to try things out, right? And when you're trying to create a shape, and it needs to have some sort of formula. Um, but you are right, and you don't need to have like a big studio like yours, right? There are some plotters that are very small, and
yep,
just with a simple pen, you can get started, right? So it's not
yeah.
like you need such a big studio to create pen plotting, right?
No, no, not at all. And when we all had the COVID thing, when we were stuck at home, I was in the smallest room in the house with like the
Mm.
computer at one end and the pen plot at the other one, and it worked absolutely fine. Now, this is a luxury thing, having a big studio like this. But you can start off with just it on the kitchen table and getting it drawing that way, which is another great way of working with it.
Yeah, and well, you have your studio because you also have a shop, right? Like a digital shop, and people can order your plots. And I was wondering if you can tell us a bit. I mean, two things. One is your art. I'm
Yep.
interested in understanding. Where do you find inspiration? What are you? How do you define what you are doing besides the technicalities? And then also, I'm very curious about having a digital shop that people can, buy and you ship it worldwide. How complex is to get it settled, like set up a digital shop, and the business side of it, and keeping track of the accounting, all this stuff. Is it easy these days, or is actually a lot of time?
It starts off as quite a lot of time. So I use Shopify, not affiliated, not sponsored, anything like that. But I use Shopify, and it's clunky, but also fairly straightforward. The most time is taking photos of the work and trying to present the work the best way to people, and it does take a little bit of management. I've been working on code and again the AI to take some of that pressure off. But it does have, this is all going to get very businessy now, but it has a running cost of about $30 a month. So I have to
Mm-hmm.
sell more than that. And then in my shipping, I use DHL for shipping again, which is an average of about $30 again to ship. Locally, it's a lot less. Globally, it's a lot more, but it averages around that. So I would have to sell one piece for $60 to cover its shipping cost and the shop. So I'd have to do that once a month. And
Mm-hmm.
it's doable, and that would cover its costs. So if you want to do that and cover your costs, it's fine. I only sell larger pieces like A3 because the cost of sending small pieces isn't really viable.
Mm-hmm.
The things that I discovered, and again, this is nerdy and businessy, is I just offer free shipping and I roll that into the price because there's certain points where people can drop out of the buying process and they go see something online and go, oh, this only costs $40. And then they go to buy it. And then you get to the shipping page and it
Yeah.
goes, oh, and that's another $40 shipping. And they just give up at that point.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, the shipping is free. I just add like $30 to the price
Yeah.
of everything. And that's one less step. So it's little things like that that take quite a bit of getting used to. And then even shipping things, I've got a couple of videos on how I ship things. But to start off with, I was so nervous I was going to get it wrong. Like I get the piece, I pack it all up. It would take me a whole morning to ship like two
Mm-hmm.
pieces. And
Okay.
double checking everything. So it does take a long time. And then you have to get the tubes or the envelopes and trying to get all that right. Now that I've done it and I've got all my materials here, if somebody buys something, I just like pack it all up, pack it away, and I'm done in like half an hour or an hour if there's a lot of orders. So it does get better, but you
Okay.
do burn a lot of time.
Oh, so can you tell us a bit about the process, how you improve it? I think I read a newsletter that you have a new AI tool that you were developing, right? So can you tell us how is that helping your process? What is it doing?
Yes, so there's a couple of ends to it. Because I'm doing pen plotting, you sort of have information like the pen type, the paper type, the ink type, if it's archival, if it's not archival, the size of it, the borders, how long it took to plot. So those are all interesting things. And then the description. And then if it's limited edition, variable edition, open edition, all of those type of things, if it's signed on the front or the back. And again, this is managing the shop. When you go, I'm going to sell a piece, so I have to take photos of it, and then I have to add the description, then add all that type of stuff, and then get other codes for it and the categories. It again, that burns up a whole bunch of time. So I was like, okay, I'm going to write a tool, and this bit isn't the AI bit, but the tool where it just asks you those questions. It goes, what size is it? And I go, and then I have a drop down list and I pick it. It goes, which pen is it? Is it one of these you've used before or a new pen? And I go, it's this pen. Okay, these colors, it's black. And then I just put the margins in. So it has all of that. And then I give it the description. And it also knows the dimensions of it. And the pictures I give it a straight on version as well. Where the AI part comes into it is that then that works with the Shopify API to upload all of that type of stuff.
Mm,
But the AI then has knowledge of the description. So my AI, what it's also doing is it's writing to social media. So now and again, it posts about what's in the shop. So it'll look to see what I have in stock, read the description, make a short tweet length version of it, take the image, put it into a mock up, and then send that out as well. So that's all stuff that used to take me a long time to do. And going all the way back to university time where the computer would run overnight and then in the morning present me with stuff, my AI is running on my laptop in the background and now and again
mhm.
interrupts me and goes, hey, Dan, I got something to pop in the shop. Do you want me to post this? And it's got 6 different options of what I can post. And I go, yeah, I like number 3, and I just press it, and then I get on with my life. So that's what's going on for me with the
Yeah.
AI and that type of stuff. But that took a long time to code. So I'm saving myself minutes every day by having spent days, putting the work in.
Yeah.
But it's the frustration, getting rid of that frustration, and it's now a lot easier to put things in the shop. So I'm more tempted to do it. Whereas before I was like, oh, it's such a pain in the ass doing this, so
Yeah.
I would never do it. So it's just making
Yeah.
things easier.
No, that's a fantastic approach, and I'm not. I mean, I'm sure many artists and other kinds of creators, right? Because this tool that you mentioned is useful not only for artists but also, marketing in general in social media. Sounds like a
Yeah,
great tool. So yeah, I think that's how you keep your business running without having to hire people to support you, right, in these
yeah,
mundane tasks that no one wants to do. So that's a
yeah.
very smart approach. Um, what will be your advice for artists that are interested in opening a shop? Will you recommend them to get a Shopify account, and get it running, or maybe you start small with a couple of prints. How will you start
I,
today in that front?
I would suggest just going for it. It's the best way is just do it. Like Shopify, it doesn't need to be Shopify. There's like Wix or Squarespace or any of those. Is get some work that you want to sell. Take photos of it with objects around it so people can tell the scale of it. On my photos, I like put decks of cards and pens around it so people can tell. Because when you take photos of a small thing, but you're zoomed in, or a big thing and you're zoomed out, they all look the same size. So you put all that around it. So that's one suggestion. And the other suggestion, this is the most important one, is go look at other artists' shops. So if
Mm,
you're going to sell generative art, find all your favorite generative artists, see if they have shops. Go look at their shops, see how much they're selling things for, see what their descriptions say, go look at their shipping information page, and then just find like the 10 that you like the best, and then go, I really like these pages. I'm going to make it like this. Don't try to figure it out yourself. That is just the worst way of doing it. Just copy other people. Just straight up copy other people. It's the easiest
yeah,
way.
that's a
But
smart.
um,
Yeah.
but having said that, it doesn't bring in a huge amount of money. It's certainly very nice. So I had a video a long time ago where I talked about kind of 3 stages of being an artist, where there's
Hmm.
the hobby stage where you're spending money on supplies like inks and paper and things like that. And then you try selling stuff, but you're not selling enough to cover those prices. That's like a hobbyist artist, which is fine. Or you can sell enough that covers the costs, which means it's
Hmm.
paying for itself. Like you've got this hobby, but you're not putting any money into it. And then the other one is where it starts making money. So it's covered its own cost and it's making money for you. And ultimately, if it completely pays for you, that's really good. And none of those is better than the others. I was keen to stress that there's nothing better than being like a professional artist or a hobby artist. It's not a tiered thing. It's just where you happen to be. And if you're happy being in the hobby artist, that's perfectly fine and keep doing that, but maybe try to sell a couple of things. If you're trying to turn it into a business, it's really hard because you can't do it on just selling individual pen plotted pieces. In one of my newsletters, I went through the timing of that, how long you'd have to run the pen plotter non-stop to be able to
Mm.
make enough to be able to sell, and you'd have to be selling them constantly. And the other thing is trying to get people to find your work, getting people to follow a call to action on Twitter is kind of really hard.
Hmm.
To the extent that it hardly happens at all. Um, so if you were going to do a print shop, you're better off doing prints of your generative art projects and doing almost like a print on demand service with those. I use a place called the Print Space. They ship globally and all around. So again, a link down below to the Print Space. But you don't need to have one printed until you sell it, which is quite a good way of doing things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Also, what you said that if you already have a generative collection, generative art collection, and I think this applies also for other kinds of artists, maybe not using pen plotters. The best is to try to give that as an extra, right, to the
Yeah.
collectors you already have.
There's a few places that do a print service, like Alba are setting up a print service. I know Verse and things like that. But if you're doing it yourself, so what I've said to artists is when you're developing a generative art project, I keep a folder of all the like when I'm testing, I'm going through and I'm saving lots of images, and those evolve over time. But when I'm going through, sometimes I find really nice ones that I save and stick in a special folder called print. And some of those might exist before you change the algorithm again. And we call those out of band designs.
Mm.
So when you release a project, you've also got a folder of, say, 20 out of band designs that you then sell in your print shop as well. And people know that you're not just spamming the generative algorithm to keep generating them all. You're like, these are handpicked by me. These are ones that I loved while I was testing the algorithm. So I'm offering these as limited edition prints or open edition prints. And then here's my project over there. And that is quite a good way of offering print versions of your generative art project. And just like, so out of
Hmm.
band is quite a good way of doing it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Also, I've seen many artists that they share their process, and also they are really hoping that some outputs come out in this format, the generative long form collections where it's really random, and sometimes some outputs don't come out for just how it works. But yeah, it's a good idea to keep save this your your working process basically, and then look at it later, or
Yeah.
as you describe. Um, awesome. And Dan, what are you working on? I know you have been moving, you have been sharing the different things you are up to, but I wonder what's in your mind right now in terms of art. Are you working on any particular project, any big projects, any small projects, or just taking it slow?
Interestingly, it would have already happened by the time this goes out. So there's one more project on Alba, and I've got some Artblocks engine projects coming up, so follow-ups to the 70s pop and the 80s pop. But I'm actually going to be taking almost like a year off producing projects, unless something terrible goes wrong. But I'm moving into in the automation of the studio, the AI that I use. Okay, maybe artists relate to this a little bit more. Because I'm running a studio, I spend half my time doing admin tasks. So there's
Mm-hmm.
lots of things like replying to emails, social media, all those type of things. And then I'm also over here, I'm doing art. And they always seem to be fighting against each other. Like, today, do I do admin or do I do art? And if I focus on art, the admin all builds up and it becomes this huge thing. But if I spend all my time doing admin, then I don't get to touch the art. And what am I? I'm not an artist. So that's what a lot of my AI, my tooling has been trying to make the admin a lot easier. But what
Mm-hmm.
started happening towards the end of last year, the end of 2023, is the code, the AI, and the tools I was building to manage the studio were also the same ones that I was using to create the art. And they suddenly came under this same umbrella and became the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of fighting against each other, I suddenly felt like I hit a groove where I'm an artist running my studio in a process, and the process is the art. And it's a lot of threads all coming together. So, the thing that you probably see me doing when I'm trying to encode my own handwriting, so that Kitty, my AI, can then write things in my own handwriting on my behalf. I was worried for a time that it was inauthentic and I was automating part of myself. But it turns out that what I'm actually doing is I'm augmenting myself. And instead of thinking of the pen plotter as an automated robot, if it's an extension, if it's a prosthesis of myself that can write on my behalf with my intention behind it, then that becomes a different thing. But I don't know quite where this is because it's kind of new using AI in this way. So I'm going to go into a thing which is called practice-based research. And research-based practice is what people do with their PhDs quite often, where
Mm-hmm.
instead of going, I think for the next year, instead of going, I'm going to create some art, then think about the art, and then create the art, I'm actually focusing on my process and going, I'm focusing on my process and the tools, and that might generate some artifacts out of it as I go along, which might be interesting, but the actual art, so it might end up in an exhibition at the end or a book. I'm documenting my process even more now and automating my process even more now and studying what it means to be an artist using AI tools in a studio with both physical and digital work. So I don't quite know where I am because this is all over the past month and I'm going to have to write an artist statement and understand it all. But I got all these books I now have to read if they're around. So like practice bed. This is my life now. Like I got a stack of these designing and conducting mixed methods research and stuff. So it's like I'm going to do a PhD, but without the
Yeah.
PhD at the end. Um, but I'm interested to see where it goes. So my art is going not on the back burner, but it's
It's
the
in a
other.
different stage, right? Another phase. It sounds
Yeah,
like another phase.
another phase. But the other interesting thing is generative artwork for art blocks and things like that has all been about you press the mint button and then the code has to generate the artwork and on FX hash in those places. So it happens quite quickly. So there's a lot of types of things that you can't do because those would take a long time to generate.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing artist curated work, then the artist can, and this goes back to the degree again of things running overnight. I want to start working with code that actually takes like an hour or 2 hours to produce an output. And I want that to be happening in the background. And then for me once a week to then be able to review them and then change parameters and send them off again. And that doesn't work for the press the button, get the mint type of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to slow everything down. And again, with the pen plotters, writing code that produces things that can take hours to output. And then that's an artifact. Some of those things are going in the shop, some of them just research. But what does it mean to be an artist who has processes running in the background constantly, now and again, spitting out a result? And then I'm changing the direction that that's going. And again, it's all new to me. I will be documenting it. Like you say, I'm making these videos, and it's going to be interesting. And it might just all be awful. It might not work at all. I don't know.
But at first, it sounds fascinating. I think it's great that you have this plan in a way that you will take you said a year, but maybe it ends up being 2 years or maybe a year and a half. And actually, how do you know when it's done? When do you feel like you're satisfied, or when does this end? Because in a PhD, I feel like they have kind of an objective somehow, right? How does it work for you? Have you established when is this phase, this exploration, this practice ends? When does it end?
I don't know, but it's interesting. But it's nice to go. It's nice to go. It's nice to get to that point again where I was doing digital stuff, and then I was like I desperately want to be an artist working the physical space. To then going back to the generative art that was digital, but also doing this drawing machine type of stuff. And it was quite often trying to reconcile that. Am I doing digital or am I doing physical artwork? And I've come to terms with that now, that they're actually intertwined, and I'm not really differentiating between digital and physical. It's now more like fast or slow. And I'm working more towards the slow outputs. And some of that might be digital and some of that might be physical. And so I think I've solved that problem for myself. I'm sitting in a place where I'm feeling pretty happy. I'm not going, I wish I was over there doing that. I'm very satisfied doing what I'm doing now. And I've chosen to slow down, spend a bit more time on teaching materials for the pen plotting, drawing machine stuff, and then to be more intentional with what I'm doing. Feels like the last 3 years were exploration and going off tangents and exploring. And it's just all come together into this new thing that I'm not quite sure what the shape of it is. I sort of want to explore and interrogate what this thing is, and see where that goes.
And will you be sharing that process? I guess you will, right? Over your social media and your channel, your YouTube. Okay, it's
the thing that it's good fun. I mean, for people who don't know, I keep like a weekly journal. A visual journal that I put onto YouTube. It's just called Week Notes, and it's small snippets of my day of what's going on. But again, with the AI, so my AI tool that sort of works for journaling, each morning it asks me a bunch of questions. So it says, "Hey, what are you doing today? What are you working on?" And it feeds in the previous 7 days into those prompts. So as I'm saying stuff, the next day it will be based on the previous thing. So I've been doing that now for about 6 months, just over half a year, where I've got a daily record of what I'm doing, and then Kitty, which is the AI, interrupts me throughout the day or pop up a question saying, "What are you doing right now? What are you doing right now? What are you doing right now?" And that was to try to give myself more time to work for social media, because social media, you're supposed to stay on top of it and let people know what you're doing. But you go to the website just to say, I'm going to do this, and then you start scrolling down and you're looking at what other people are doing, and it's a time sink. Even when I was going, I'm really quite good at this, I'll just go on for half an hour, I can find myself getting lost in it. So separating that out, sort of just typing what I'm doing over here, and now and again the AI would go, I'm going to post that Dan is busy talking on a Zoom call or something like that, and then I could go, yeah, okay, say that, and then I get back to what I'm doing. Is put a buffer between me and social media. But I've got like 6 months worth of that, and then I've got over a year's worth of these weekly videos where the AI also has a transcript of every single one of those videos. So it knows what I've been doing for over a year now. So I can actually start to query that with AI and go, can you tell me what the sentiment was over the last 4 months? Can you tell me, are there any common ideas that keep popping up that I haven't noticed? And AI is very good at pattern recognition and asking you questions. Is very bad at giving you sort of answers that aren't flat out lies, but it is quite good at sort of that other stuff. So that's one of the reasons why I spend a lot of time documenting, is now I have all of that. I can then start interrogating it in interesting ways, which is a lot better than if I hadn't done it at all. Don't recommend making weekly videos. They take so much time. Don't do it.
Yeah. But then my question is, um, so I get the process, right? So you are giving input, what you're doing, how you're feeling, what are your thoughts to the AI. It keeps track of it, it adds it, and but then from there, how does that translate? How does that translate into an artwork? What is the output? Is it, you mentioned plotting your typewriting? Is that the output, or you are still exploring how to
I,
produce an output from this?
Yeah, it's now that I have all that, it's exploring how to do it. So there's another book. There's these people, Steph and Georgia. They do like data visualization and things.
Mm,
So they have ways of sort of encode. I'll see if I can find a pretty page. Uh, so they sort of have this visualization stuff that's all hand drawn, that's based on data. So they're kind of tracking what they're doing and then picking certain metrics to draw over time. Now, I can't draw, but I have a robot that can draw for me. So what happens if I start having my robot do visualizations on my time management, my project management, my moods, like when I first log in, all of those type of
mm,
things? What can I start to interrogate, and can I turn my art practice into a visualization, into art, and just ridiculous things like getting Kitty to write a journal for me of what I've done, but in my handwriting onto pages that I then bind into a book. So I have a handwritten journal in my handwriting of what I've done, but without me going through the process of actually writing it myself by hand. But
yeah.
I've augmented myself and my
Mm-hmm.
physicality to actually start generating things like that. And then what does it mean to have a handwritten journal of a whole year when that's generated by an AI, but it's generated by what I put into it, but it's in
Yeah.
my handwriting. Like, so it's those type of things that I'm starting to explore, I think.
Yeah. No, sounds exciting. I think you have done your research in terms of books, and how to properly prepare this. Not sure if you want to call it an experiment. Could be an experiment as well. But yeah, I like. It's very unique. I really like your approach of taking some time to actually do that, but you combine that with your shop and with your content creation. So really fascinating. Um, and then, there is a question that's not easy to answer, but I like to ask all the guests in the podcast, which is, 3 artists that inspire you that you would like to mention. It could be, any kind of artist, ideally from the not maybe in the coded art space that you
Oh,
you are inspired by.
okay. Let's do not in the coding space first. Obviously, first Bridget Riley, who people may or may not be familiar with. She's an artist who did a lot of stuff in the 60s and 70s with the op art movement. So she had a lot of mathematics behind her art. But what I found interesting about her, and this comes up again, is with studio assistants, is she would devise like a line that's going to be in the work, and then her studio assistants would then draw the rest of the lines following her rules. So she would give rules to her assistants, and they would follow the rules. And then she'd say, we're going to use this pattern like black, white, or when she moved into colors, different colors. And again, give the instructions to the studio artist, who would then paint all those in. And then she comes at the end and signs it. So I like the visual appeal of that work. And I also really like the process. So Bridget Riley's one, which moves us on to Damon Hirst, which he does the dots and the spots. And again, he has studio artist, which is something that people pick him up on all the time. Go, oh, he's not making his art; he's getting his assistants to do it, which has been true all the way through. Like the grandmasters would have apprentices who they'll go, "Can you draw the landscape background?" And then at the end they'll draw some trees and things like that. So, but again, it's you don't have to be the artist. You don't have to be an artist with a paintbrush painting yourself by hand to create art. You can define the parameters that you're going to generate art in and then hand that off to somebody else. As generative artists, that someone else is the code and the computer. As a pen plotter artist, it's the code and the drawing machine. So the argument there is like, I've made some art, but have I because I didn't draw it? But obviously you can. It's in art. Damon Hirst, lots of people have. It's quite a common practice. So Damon Hirst, the other one. And then let's go with Zancan from our code thing. The way he works, the outputs he has working with the pen plotter, the way he's still going and keeps pushing through. I think what he does is fantastic. I think he's a wonderful person, and I really love his work as well. So those three. Let's go.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing list. I'm a big fan of all of them, and yeah, you explained the reasons quite well, and yeah, fantastic list. By the way, and another reminder for everybody: the names, artists, collections, the books that Dan mentioned, all of those will be in the show notes. So if you're looking for links, you can find on there. And it was a pleasure, Dan. It was a pleasure. Thanks so much for sharing your studio with us and your practice and everything you're doing. And I'm going to be, paying attention to your project. That sounds like a very unique thing, and I'll be watching your journal on YouTube.
Yeah. Yep. It'll be good fun. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great fun. Really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Have a great day.
Bye.